I'm gonna go to live chat. Just, just right off the bat, because we're crazy like that. It really is the wrong cam. They all are the wrong cam. And in this case, it was actually an imaginary cam, so it's even better. So, if you guys haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it, we only have one person here. Ricky, yeah, right. It's just me and Ricky. Oh, now we got more people coming in. The video that I just posted like moments ago is the truck Norris 6-liter cam test, except I didn't test anything. I just guessed. But we're going to get to that. Frost cold Gatorade Frost Cool. I wonder if that makes me cool. Probably not. It's going to take more than that. So, got two things to talk about because I posted 2 videos today because, it's time to get with the program. First one. So let me know. Which one would you rather have? You have a 5-liter Ford Mustang, or a 5-liter T-Bird, whatever you want. I don't care what it is. 302. Would you rather upgrade to the 347? And that's what that video was about. Would you rather have the displacement and then keep the sucky heads and the camshaft, or would you rather upgrade the heads and the camshaft but keep the same displacement? So as we saw in the video, there really is there's no choice there, unless all you care about is torque below 3,000 RPM. There's really no choice there. I mean, one of them made more than a good. It would always be near 100 horsepower more than the other. So the heads, cam, and intake kind of thing, definitely a way to go. And when you saddle even a 347, and this would be the same if you did it with a 351, if you saddle that with the very restrictive stock 5-liter cylinder heads, and the camshaft is actually not too bad. It would make a lot more power if you had good head flow. But and then we had a GT40 intake manifold on a 347, a GT40 is still kind of restrictive. So I really like that test. It's one of that series with that motor, comparing the 302 stuff and the 347 stuff. And then I really like when we do these bigger motors and stuff and then put all of the super restrictive stock stuff on it. I've done tests where we've done like blower motors and then put stock exhaust manifolds and H pipes and mufflers and all that stuff on it. And it really hurts the power. But I like doing that test, especially on blower stuff, because then you see, hey, look, we a lot of times we do it in reverse. So like we're running it the way that you should with headers and a good exhaust and stuff. And they put the stock stuff back on, but you see what happens. I mean, the boost goes up and the power goes down, and it just gets generally unhappy. It sounds terrible. It's just really unhappy. And it just goes to show you that a lot of those things become important, and more so when you add boost and you have higher power outputs. You're talking about that stuff. So the 347 test was good. And then, like you would, applying boost to all of them is the way to go. So I applied boost to the very restricted 347, so the stock heads and stock camshaft and the GT40 intake, and it made less power than the NA in terms of peak. It made less power with the Vortec on the 347, made less power than the NA 302 did with heads, cam, and intake. Admittedly, that's the best heads, cam, and intake that I've ever done on a stock short block, because it had the 11R heads, had the 170 11R heads. It had it had just a dual plane carbureted intake manifold on it, and it had that 274 cam. There's certainly more. I mean, if you just took that cam and put it on a 110 or 108 or 106, I don't know what's going to fit, but it would certainly gain torque, but it probably would gain power everywhere instead of the 112 and 113 versions that they run on those. But it fits available piston to valve clearance, and it idles better and stuff. And so it would drive around nice with the wider LSA. So you could choose. And that's one of the conversations I get in with people about because every time we have a conversation about it, someone brings in, well, what about the David Vizard 128 formula? That's all great. Except that there's a list of 5 other things that are reasons that people buy cams and have nothing to do with that. But we can use it to make power at least. So I like that, and I like the fact that we ran that with a blower, and then even with a blower, it didn't make as much power as the NA version of the heads cam intake 302. And then you do what you do. We modified the 347. We put ported heads, the RHS heads, probably not the best heads that we could put on there. And that XFI camshaft and the RPM2 intake manifold. I like the RPM2 intake manifold. In fact, I like it a lot, especially for a 5-liter. It works well on these stroker ones too, but I don't think it's a good match for as much camshaft as we put in it. That 231 cam, and it's on a 114. So the 236 cam, 236, 248, 579 lift. I'm okay with that. The direction's good. It probably would want a different intake manifold with that cam, or the RPM2 intake manifold. I'd probably lean more towards something going toward the 274 cam with that combination. Even on a 347, I think it would drive better, and with a blower, it would still make lots of power. It wouldn't make as much as that one, but it would be a better combination for driving around. If I had it in my car, I would want the smaller camshaft. Maybe something between those two, between 224 and 236 on the intake. So 230-ish or something like that would be maybe good. Depends on how much you wanted to put up with. I had the 274 cam in my car, and I had like an 8.5 to 1 short block on it, and then I had the high port heads, which I don't think that they're ideal. I honestly don't think that back then an as cast high port head probably wasn't even what it wouldn't be anywhere near what this 11R head would be. I bet this 11R head would be 25 or 30 horsepower up on that head, just out of the box versus in a comparison. Stuff is better now than what we did back in my day. So we put the heads cam and intake manifold on the 347, and just like you would expect, it made lots more power. And then when we put the blower on it, it made a lot more power. And then the same thing happened with the 302. We put the blower on the modified version with heads cam and intake manifold. We put a torque storm on that one, but a similar kind of deal in the power levels that we were running it at, which was they were all sub 700 horsepower stuff. So the blowers had more than enough to support where we were at. And they each did what they're supposed to do. We only ran about 8 pounds, didn't rev it out. But the nice thing is, I indicated in the video that, like on the 347, the one thing about the big cam is even restricted somewhat by that intake manifold, it wanted to rev. Well, when they want to rev and go to 6,500 instead of making peak power at 5,500, then with a centrifugal blower, it adds more power. So it's just a good deal all the way around. And so that worked out very well. So I want to make sure I'm not, since we're in live chat, I don't know how far back I can go. But the other thing is the video that I just put up is the truck Norris cam. After I've run it on a 4.8, I've run it on a 5.3. Everybody wants to know, well, what about a 6.0? Does it work on a 6.0? Is it too small on a 6.0? Is it not going to make any power? Is it not a good match? Is it, yada, yada, yada. What is it? So I haven't run that test because I don't have a real good 6.0. I still need to do what I want to do is I'm going to have to do a bubble test on the 6-liter, and I'll explain that at another time. Maybe on the 24-hour deal, I'm working up a list of things that I want to talk about. I obviously need a whole list of things to talk about ahead of time before I do this. I've got to prep for stuff like that. Just like I was talking about, I prep for when I go tell people how much power I think their motor is going to make. I just don't do it usually off the top of my head, unless it's something that I've already run a bunch of times. I know what it is. Hey, Richard, what does a 5.3 make with a truck Norris? Well, we know what that is. If you tell me what the intake manifold is, and we know what that is. But I do, you got to do the homework so that you know what's going on. But on the 6-liter, what I wanted to do, the test was actually less about what a truck Norris cam would make, because honestly, I don't think that's a great bit of information that the whole world needs. But what I do think is helpful is the way that you approach providing that information. So what is the thought process that goes along with that? So for me, I showed, hey, let's use logic and let's go, look, we have these 2 points of test data on the 5.3, and then we have one of those same cams as a test point data on the 6.0. And so if we take all of that information, use a little bit of math, we should be able to kind of come to a conclusion. One of the things I wanted to go over here on the live feed that I didn't go over in the video, because, you know, the live feed guys rule and you guys get better information. But I didn't talk about, at the end of the video, I talked about how much power I thought the thing would make. Now, right off the bat, you would think, and I mentioned this in the video on the 5.3, when you're comparing, because we use the sloppy stage 2 as the transition cam, because we ran the sloppy stage 2 on both those motors. So we talk about the fact that the sloppy stage 2 made more than the truck Norris cam because it's a bigger cam. One of them is a 212 cam, the other one's a 228 cam. So one of them is a lot bigger than the other. So in terms of peak power, one of them is going to make more power. So you would think, logically, that if we go from a smaller motor to a bigger motor, that the difference might tend to grow there. Maybe we'd see more of a difference on the bigger cam between the truck Norris and the sloppy stage 2. And this is adding to this is the fact that the bigger motor also has better cylinder heads. I mean, the 5.3 has 799 heads. The 6 liter has the 823 heads, has the rec port heads on it. At least the one that I tested it on. So it has more head flow. It's got a better intake manifold. It does have a truck intake manifold, as an LY6 intake manifold, but it is in every way better than the Cathedral Port early truck manifold. It's the equivalent of an LS3 manifold. So you think, well, the bigger cam, the spread should be even greater between those two. Here's why I don't think that that's going to happen. The truck Norris cam matched within 1 foot-pound the torque of the bigger cam on the 5.3. I honestly think that that's going to continue on the larger motor. And the other thing that I didn't talk about in the video is this. And this is the fact that the sloppy stage 2 cam is a 228, 230 duration split. The truck Norris cam is a 212, 2 something. It has a bigger split at any rate. Whatever that number is, it's a much bigger split. And you can see on the 5.3 that it didn't fall off, so it continues to kind of level out. What I think is when we put the tighter split, even though it's a bigger cam, on the bigger motor, I don't think we're going to get the top end gains that we normally see when we have a camshaft that has a bigger split, like if we had a 228, 236 cam, I think we see more top end. The sloppy stage 2 kind of works good for some of these smaller motors because it doesn't have that big split. It's leaning, it's single pattern cam adjacent. It almost identifies as a single pattern cam. And so that I think is going to hurt its peak power. But on the truck Norris cam, it's not saddled with that. So I think we're going to see, and I'm excited about testing it as long as I can find a set of rec port heads to replace the ones that I already got rid of for the LY6 and get the LY6 to not leak water. Then I can redo this test. So I'm excited about doing it now and talking about it. But I think that that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to see. My guess was that this thing is going to make over 500 horsepower. It's going to be right. It's going to be right at the 500 number, and it's going to be over 490 foot-pounds of torque on that LY6. The sloppy stage 2 cam made 514 when we tested it, and so I think that the truck Norris cam is going to be right there on torque, and I think it's going to be even maybe a little bit closer than it was on the 6 liter than it was on the 5.3. Let me know what you guys think. That's my story. And I'm kind of sticking with it. So I can scroll back and okay, I'm all at the beginning now, so I can get all the way back to live chat. Blue collar, checking in. I have an LQ4 241 heads, a truck Norris cam going to my 2000 Silverado. That should be good. The 241 heads will definitely be better than the 317s. Had a tooth pulled today. You're a toothless hillbilly. We probably have some teeth, right? Do you prefer torque or horsepower? Those are actually the same thing. One of them is work and one of them is work over time. But if you look at them on a graph, they're always related. Another form of replacement for displacement. That must be boost. I have a 302. I'd rather have the 347 so I could handle the power with ease and good AFR heads and 274 cam. Yeah, we would want all that, right? What about keeping stock displacement with force injection? That's what we did. We ran the heads cam and intake on the stock displacement and then added boost to that. Because the only thing better than heads cam and intake on a 302 is a supercharged one of those or a turbocharged one of those. 11R heads, they worked very well. And they were the small ones too. They were the 170s. My phone doesn't live, but the Mustang lives good. Turns out my key on tap point was only getting 7 volts. Wow. So it was unhappy. So it's got 12 volts now. Which cam is choppy and still great for boost? That's going to be kind of a tough combination. But what size motor is it? And what are you trying to do with it? 1 liter MOF. A big cam equals poor fuel mileage. They tend to do that. Let's see. .302 has more friction, provides more instant horsepower with all stage 3 components. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what you're comparing there. What does a 302 have more friction than? Let's take a built Coyote over an LS. Torque and RPM are friends. Coyote doesn't hold up. I can go to funny car chaos through. Honestly, I probably won't. So, Hadmore, you pick a mod motor over a Coyote? Debate amongst the wives and I is dinosaur a connoisseur of dinoing or an old person that gets to play on the dinosaur? Yes, it is. It is both of those things. Have you done a Chevy 305? Yeah, I have Chevy 305 videos up. In fact, I did the information from one of these from the 302 video that I just put up. Some of the dyno testing was actually from a comparison that I did between Chevy and Ford 5 liters from back in the day, starting out with a tune port 305 and the 5 liter Ford, and comparing them in stock and then all the way through different stages of modification, which included heads, cam, and intake, and nitrous, and single plane intake manifolds, and blowers, and we didn't ever do turbos though. Test the Texas Speed Mad Max cam. If you take a look at the cams that I ran in the last video where I ran 8 different cams and you kind of plug in the specs of that cam, it should kind of tell you what it will do. Chevys are scared of your little $5,000 4S and 95 5 liter. They don't want the sauce. Turbo Sentra, you found the oil restriction? It wasn't drilled properly on all 4 of my engine blocks. So it was a consistent problem from the factory machine work? Try to fix one and we'll test tomorrow. Good, let me know, man. A 302 Ford will turn 9,000. Probably not one with a stock block. Put my 4.8 on a dyno against a Coyote Mustang timing chain. The timing chain let go on the Coyote. And, guys can argue about Coyotes and LSs all that they want, but the reality is that a Coyote makes lots of power, and so does an LS. There's no shortage of power that you can make with either one of those. 4.6 should live at 9,000, but the intake is set for 6 to 7. Bonjour. Dinosaur just got a free 1990 TBI 305. I want to stuff it into an 8610. Do I need electronics or computers? And are there aftermarket versions? What I would do is not do that. I would put a carburetor and a distributor and a carbureted intake manifold on there and replace the TBI. I just cut my bad block open and looked at it. Did you cut it in half or something? Gen 3 and a Gen 3 with Gen 4 rods or crankshafts interchangeable. They physically will fit, but the balance will be different because on a Gen 4 the reluctor wheel will be different. Coyote has a lot of technology and way more moving parts, similar to the ZR1. Impressive for sure, but the reliability of a Coyote will not be an issue. It's already good. It's not at all what the ZR1 was. Fords have been making the double overhead cam modular stuff for a long time now, and the Coyote's a good motor. There's no putting it down. It works really well, and it makes lots of power. And it makes lots of power under boost. It has good heads. It does a lot of things really well. The thing that I don't like about a Coyote, and honestly, given the power that it makes, this is probably not even really an issue. But I don't like that they limited the bore spacing on it. They limited displacement because the only thing better, like especially on an NA version, although they make really good NA power because they make lots of RPM and they have good 4-valve heads and stuff in there and put cams in an intake manifolds. But the only thing better than a 5-liter Coyote would honestly be a 6-liter Coyote because then you'd have lots of extra torque too. But you just can't get that with the architecture. 208, 214, 110 plus 4 has even more low end than a truck Norris. Have you done the back-to-back test on those? Come on, blue collar, you know better than that. You should play with nitromethane and gas mix as a power out to see how much you can get away with as a mix. Nitromethane actually doesn't mix very well with gas. It mixes much better with an alcohol-based fuel. I just got here. Did you guys talk about the truck Norris with a 6-liter? We did. We talked about it this earlier, but that video is up so you can see. But when you go there, don't expect dyno data because I didn't dyno test it. All I did was guess, and there's a reason that I guessed because I was taking you through a thought process and how I answer questions from people. I have a truck Norris cam and an L76, and I love it. It's going to be a good cam for a 6-liter. It's going to be a really good driver, and it's going to be torquey, and it's also going to rev enough. Like I said, I'm on a rec port headed deal. It's going to be a 500 horsepower cam or thereabouts. I'm scrolling. Richard, I have a feeling that you'll test this on a rec port engine. I want to only because that's the motor that I did the guessing on. But I hope you'll do it on a cathedral port. It's just that the cathedral port head isn't going to respond to it any differently. It's just that the starting point and the ending point are going to be different. It's not going to all of a sudden like one cylinder head and the other. We've already been through all that. So if the cathedral port, like an LQ4, starts out around 400 horsepower, so it's going to go from 400 with a stock cam to whatever 450 or 440 or whatever the number is, and then we went from 440 to 500 or thereabouts. Well, at least we think we're going to, on a cathedral port deal. It's the same thing. You're still getting gains, and you're just starting and ending at a different point. AJ just watched the 5.3 with all the stock cams. That's a good video. That was a lot of testing, but it was good stuff. The thing is that you don't know what the reasoning behind their choice of camshaft is, and it's not power and it's not torque. The reasoning behind their cam choices are different things, and we're not privy to that. If you're here, don't ask a question with the word thoughts in it. 5.7 706 heads in the cam. 222, 227. Are the heads all stock, and what intake manifold is on it? We need a 6.2 single overhead cam. Take the new BMW Super engine. James, I'm late, but are you saying a 347 with E7 heads unported versus something like an AFR 185 GT40 type intake, an XE282 and a 5-liter? DFA, the video is up, so you can see exactly what the combinations that I'm talking about. But we did run the 347 with a stock set of E7 heads, bone stock. The only thing they had done to them was a valve spring upgrade because we were going to run cams on them later on. And then a stock 5-liter cam, and then a GT40 intake, only because I didn't have the HO upper and lower, which would have restricted it even more by 15 or 20 probably. I've always heard that off-road builds should keep a torque converter stall near stock. What is your experience with choosing torque converter stalls on off-road trucks with large tires and low gears? I don't think a stock stall is where you're going to be. It's going to depend on the stall speed. Is going to depend on where your power production is. How much boost can you run on a 3800 with a supercharger running 85 and a zip intercooler? Well, if you put ring gap in it, and are you putting a ring gap in it? Are you putting a camshaft in it? What are you doing? You can probably run all the boost that an M90 would be able to supply on that. But I wouldn't be worried. I wouldn't be interested as much about boost as I would about power. That's why I'm saying if you have a 3800 and you spin the heck out of it with a stock cam, not going to do nearly as much as if you have a camshaft in there, because the boost is going to come down and the power is going to go up. Loved your video on the intake pan. I've got a 7.4 with severe oil leak on the intake manifold. Could cause a misfire. Replacing the distributor plugs wires, but I don't want to do the TBI. Yeah. You don't want like the internal intake leaks that come up from the valley into the ports, because it leaks and also draws oil in there. So that can become problematic. And it's obviously, sometimes it's harder to figure out. Sometimes you can spray stuff in the valley and change the idle speed. What are the best cathedral heads on a 5.3, the truck Norris or stage 3 BTR? There's no best cathedral head on that. Your question should be, you should be wondering how much power you should want to make a certain amount of power or achieve a certain thing. And then you should ask how to achieve that, because there's no best head, not for any combination. Someone needs a 3D printed TPI intake manifold for the LS. What's the difference between a 383 Plymouth and a crate 383? Well, it could be a lot because they offered a lot of different 383s of varying power outputs from the factory in a Plymouth. And they don't know which crate 383 you're talking about. Does somebody sell a crate 383 Mopar motor? Is it Mopar Performance or somebody? And then it would depend on how they configured it. Do they have, what heads do they have on it? What camshaft they have? What compression is it? All that stuff. Crash, you have an idea about a flat plane LS setup? Kind of not really interested in that. There's not going to be a difference in power between a cross plane and a flat plane crank. It's going to sound a lot different, but I don't think you're going to see much power as long as all the other things stay the same. Richard, the oil galley is on the outside of the block. Oh, you just cut it open? Okay. Does it run along the outside of the block? Is that where it is? Blue collar's out. Does the truck nose really chop? It will chop a little bit in a 4.8, enough that you would need a converter. And I argued with Brian about that. I think it needs a converter on a 5.3 too, but he says, no, we have guys here running them with stock converters on 4.8s. Looking at the change in power down low, I mean, I'm not a tuner, but I know that it would work a lot better, since if it loses power down low, I think it's going to need a converter. At least that's what I go by. Let's see. Okay. What is the cup situation on your LS? 5,500 feet, would a 6875 versus a 7275 be that different? At what boost level are you running at? Are you trying to max both of those turbos out? Will you ever get your hands on a TIC cam for testing, specifically their Torque Max line? They seem different than most truck cams due to the wide split and wide LSA. Take a look at the video that I did of the 8 cams. They're going to be in there somewhere. They're going to be in there, and they're going to be comparable to the ones that have similar duration. There is no magic cam that's going to do 30 foot-pounds better than everything else. Much as people want that to be true, I have never seen that in all the cams I've ever tested. Do you ever do a 6-liter small block 383 comparison? Even just a dinosaur, but I'd rather keep the old school. But you get to keep the 383 if that's what you want. I built lots of 383 small blocks, and they work really well. It's not the thing that you like is not in comparison to something else. We don't have to be like that. That's not important. If I like a blue shirt, I don't care that somebody else likes a red shirt or a green shirt, a yellow shirt, or whatever it is. That doesn't change the one that I like, or my hat, or whatever, my Chevy Sprint Turbo. None of that matters. If you like a 383 and it works good and it solves your problem and speaks to you and does the things that you like, it doesn't matter what any of us say about it. Richard, you pit the Boss 6.2 against a Coyote and the L3. Yeah, that comparison's never going to happen. Can I get away with a Summit 8707 600 lift cam on an LQ4 with 706 heads? The lift has nothing to do with whether the cam will fit. The lift only has to do with retainer to seal clearance. The duration is what you need to look at. LCXU, I can't answer questions based on what cam manufacturers do. I don't have access to their the inside workings of a cam manufacturer. Poly single intake stock heads on that 5.7. It's a single plane intake manifold on the 5.7. You want the chop and performance of the truck Norris cam puts out. If you want more chop, then put a hot rod cam in it. I drove my LT5 cammed L83 for the first time Saturday. Way more power than stock. I would recommend it for someone who wants a stock sounding idle but more power. An LT5 cam in the L83. I'd have to look up the specs on that. Normally, when they do blower cams, they're a lot softer down low. That's been the case on all their previous stuff, but I don't know exactly what the specs are on the LT5. Our AFR Trickflow 215 heads overkill on a 383 LS stroke. I'm shooting for 550 horsepower. Then no. If you're going turbo in the near future, you don't need those heads if you're going to a turbo. I would just use stock heads. But either one of those heads will work well for a 550 horse 383 LS. And you don't need a LS stroker either if you're going to go turbo. You can just keep the displacement that you have. Regarding my intake leak on a 7.4, because severe oil leak, leaking externally. If it's leaking externally out the outside of the motor, that's not a problem. If it's leaking into an intake port, that could cause a problem. And I don't think it's going to cause a problem getting down on a plug. Would less flow accentuate the difference, or would higher flow, or what would make it truly find a difference? A cross ram LSXRT would have a different curve than a standard LSXRT. Is that still a discussion about the crankshaft? See, it's always the flat plane crank, the golf ball dimples, and the rod ratio. Gen 353, 243 heads, LS1 manifold, comp cam. Everything with the LS1 manifold would be good. If you want to make more power, a better manifold would be better. My understanding, Chuck Norris is a good all-around cam, not so much lift, but it should be torquey. It works really well, but lift isn't going to help it much. We saw that because we ran an NSR version of the Chuck Norris cam, which is 500 lift, and then we ran the regular version, which is 550 lift, and the difference is about 6 horsepower. Also got into Nick's garage video on 440 with a long ram, cross ram that his dyno could not properly load at the lower RPM Nick was aiming for. If it's the Sonic Ram deal, the big crisscross deal, they ran one at West Tech and I think had to go all the way down to 2,000 RPM. But this was bigger than a 440. I think it was near 500 inches before they could actually find where the torque peak was. Crash, you're obsessed with the flat plane and you want to build one. They sound good. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I had one and they do sound good. And that one liked to rev. It was an 8,500 RPM motor, but it is vibration prone. Drilling LS pistons for oil scavenging. Are you talking about oil scavenging, or are you talking about drilling the rods for oiling the bottom of the piston? 1051. Again, I can't answer your question about why manufacturers grind things. I'm not a manufacturer, so I'm the wrong person to ask that. How many junkyard LSs have you seen or heard of that had lifter bore damage? I've only ever run across one, and this was the 4.8 that I did a video on, and the damage wasn't so bad that we didn't run it, but that's the only thing I've ever seen. The cam was damaged and the lifter did rotate, and both of those were bad, but I haven't seen the bore be bad enough that we didn't just do a quickie hone and run it. As much driving as you do from the dyno, I would recommend a catch can for the truck. I put one on my 150,000 mile 5.3 Tahoe and catch about 16 ounces per oil change interval. How do you keep it sealed? Spun a bearing on my 4.8 again. Do you got an issue somewhere? Currently building an LQ9 with the VTR Stage 2 cam, springs, upgrade, L6 manifolds, stock heads, larger injectors. Yeah, that should be a good setup. Have you tested the Trinity BTR long runner intake? I've only seen those. I've never run one. Do they have them for cathedral port stuff and for the Gen 3 and 4 stuff? I thought that I'd only seen their manifolds for the Gen 5 stuff. And it doesn't look like the ones that I saw were not long runner. They were longer than 4 inches, but they were not long runner like a Fast has a long runner. I was really hoping for magic cams and magic parts. And what about magic valve events? I guess the magic cams would have that, right? Okay, single plane intake manifold. I'd have to go back and look at a 5.7. How often should I change out my valve springs in my truck Norris cam? Did you put new valve springs in it? Building a drag truck S10, would like to make close, if not 500 crank horsepower, the stock bottom end 5.3. Watch the videos. Yeah, I have 3 different choices of how to do that. What could you recommend for a good, reliable? Well, all those videos are up, so you can see what we use. The TrickFlow 205 head or a ported and slightly milled set of 706 heads or 243 heads. Any of those will work. And then you're going to need a good sized cam in there. And then we use the Fast because it made the most average power. You can, there are other manifolds that would make more power at higher engine speeds. So I don't know how high you want to rev it. Oh, I don't have a pull up there, right? But I need one. We'll have to put a quick pull up. Okay, is my guess of 500 horsepower on the truck Norris cam on the Rec Part 6 liter accurate? Shall see. I Crash, the flat plane crank is not what's going to determine the RPM potential of the motor. Richard, can a 4853 be turned into a 5.7? Yes. And if so, can it take a lot of boost with forged internals? If you're going to run boost on it, you shouldn't bore it out that far. I wouldn't do that. Just leave it as a 5.3. There's, as we've shown, there's not a limit in power that you can make. If you have a stock bottom end, or if you're putting forged internals on it, you're going to get to the limit of the block. And so I wouldn't do that to the block. You don't need more displacement to make the turbo power. You have the turbo. The turbo is going to do that just fine. What's the best cam for 800 horsepower on LS? The one that you run with a S475 turbo. How common are bad bearings? I don't have that happen on LS stuff. That's right, Nitro. What's the best NA cam for a 5.7 LS one with 243 heads? There isn't one. You need to tell me how much power you want to make. Richard, if I swap my LQ9 to the Trailblazer SS intake and the same heads you showed on that 6-liter, well, you can't run a Trailblazer SS intake manifold because a Trailblazer SS intake manifold is a cathedral port intake manifold. And the intake manifold that I had on there is an LY6 intake manifold. So it's a rec port one. And then if you have an LQ9, actually might even do a little better than that because it has a flat top piston. And the LY6 has valve reliefs because it has a variable cam. Eric, I would be surprised if springs go bad at 30,000 miles, given that the factory stuff lasts 300,000 miles. $15 votes at 100%, and then I look up and it's no longer 100%. $500 horsepower with a tiny cam? No way. Okay. Which EFI system did you use on the dyno? The Mike, so you know the factory LS3 cam made 476. Richard, which EFI system do you use on the dyno? Normally we run it with a Holley HP, but I also have an MS3 Pro that we ran that inline 6-cylinder with, and we've used fast on stuff way back too. I have had a cam go bad, but it was not a cam. Well, the cam ended up being bad, but a cam bearing go bad when I was doing in the middle of doing that big all the factory cams. I did that test, and while I was doing the LS6 cam, it went bad. It grabbed the cam bearing and spun the cam bearing, so I had to do a block swap and take all that stuff and swap it over into a new block. Edward, I get asked this from time to time on V6 guys wanting to put a V8 in. I think you would be time and money and frustration ahead to sell your car and then buy a V8 Mustang. It'd be a lot easier for you because they would have all the things that you need. Did you shove the cam in full speed? It was still hot, still smoking from the dyno test. Going to put an LS3 intake and an LS9 cam and milled ported 8 What's an 865 head on a junkyard 5.3 and expect great things? I'm hoping that that's a facetious. Texas Speed does say it changed dual springs every 35,000 miles. That'd be an interesting question for Brian. I'd like to ask him. I mean, I don't know that these guys really know. The OEMs know how long they last. Any information on the truck Norris on a stroker? Yeah, I don't. What is it you're trying to do with the stroker? The cam doesn't care about what the size of the motor is, other than it getting to be too small. Not that it doesn't work with the stroker. It's just that the bigger motors would need more camshaft. But if you're still wanting lots of low speed power and that's where you're driving it, then it will work well. Mad, your butt dyno says the L96 with the truck Norris feels like 500 horsepower, 500 flywheel horsepower, but from the truck. Have you tested the Holley dyno controls on a GM TBI engine? I haven't. You mean, have I run a throttle body injected motor on a with the Holley ECU? Is that what you're asking? And are you talking about a factory GM TBI like the 80s and early 90s ones? Well, look at the junkyard engine. What are the top 3 things you look at? Well, while I'm walking by, if it's an LS, I look at the cylinder head because that's what I care about the most. Then the first thing I look at, if it's a motor that I think that I want, I look and see if the car is crashed. Not to wish bad things on people, but you want the car to be crashed because you want the reason that the car is in the salvage yard because it was running and the car itself got hurt. If it's not crashed, then it could be that the motor went bad and they sold it, or the transmission. That's harder to determine. So I liked having crashed vehicles that were driving and then broke and hopefully crashed in the back and not in the front. And you also look to make sure that there are no evidence of like engine fires and stuff. Why not take advantage of the variable cam for a hot street engine? It would be good. I just can't do it. And it would be something you could do in the car. I can't do that on the engine dyno because the management system that we use won't run the variable cam timing. Let's see. Bright lights cause bearing failure. I tried to be real sneaky, pulling one cam out and putting the other one in. I mean, we did like 12 of them that day. I'm doing an LQ9 with LS3 heads with the Chupacabra or the truck Norris cam. Can't decide yet. They're both going to do the same kind of thing. The truck Norris looks real promising. What do you think? I don't think that there's a bad choice between those two. The decision may be made for you. Maybe one of them is in stock and one of them is not. Maybe one of them is a better price than the other. So the red hot cam is choppier cam, will get similar results. No, the red hot cam is a bigger cam and it will make more power on the top than the truck Norris, but less on the bottom, but it will be choppier. And that's what you're going to get when you get a choppier cam. Randy, with all due respect, I read the Trailblazer SS manifold came in both cathedral and rec port heads, or did I read that wrong? You may be calling that intake manifold a Trailblazer SS intake manifold. It wouldn't have come in a Trailblazer SS. The manifolds are different. A Trailblazer SS was a cathedral port manifold. The one that we use is a cathedral port manifold. That intake manifold was on an LY6. I got the whole motor as an LY6. That's an LY6 intake manifold. It is a rec port intake manifold, and you have to run a rec port intake manifold with rec port heads, unless you're using those silly adapters, and I do not recommend that. Do bigger valves add horsepower? They can, but a 241 already has bigger valves than a 706 head. But most guys, when they're doing ported versions of those heads, like CNC ported versions, go up in valve size also, but they're teaming that with a port that's a CNC port that's and a valve job and a seat that's designed for the bigger valve, and usually a chamber also. A little off topic, but you plan on testing an LFX? That's not on the list right now. The 408, my S10 street driven toy, makes 400 or 40 mile trips to work a couple times a week. Take a look at the, Richard, you probably have looked at the 408 testing that I did with the small cam, and then I think we put a 231 cam or something. It's going to be in between those, slanted more toward that 206 cam that we ran. It's going to be, I think, a pretty good bit better than that 206 cam, but it's still going to make a lot less power than the bigger cam does. I've never tried running the Holly with a factory TBI. We tried testing a factory TBI motor way back. I think it was a 305. And the tuner that was there at Westech at the time, way back, we could not get the thing to work with, I think he was trying to do it with a fast, though, back at the time. Will an SS intake manifold fit an express van with a 6-liter? I think a van would have come with a truck intake manifold. AJ, sorry, late to reply. O-ring catch can that goes from the PCV to the vacuum port for the PCV cut and pipe in place. Got from Amazon. Okay. It's a common mod in the Tahoe community. AJ, send me an email on that and show me what you're talking about. It's going to be fun with 400 horsepower. It makes 262 now. 400 is going to be definitely better than 262. I never did the Big Bang K24. Richard, have you tested the BFD Chop Monster 6-liter cam? No, I haven't. But I'm sure that I've tested cams that are like that. Hot mess. I don't know. I don't remember what cam you're talking about. And I'd 40 over dome piston 5.7. Is it a stock head on that? Oh, ported heads. See, that's always a thing. And then what intake manifold did you talk about? Are you using on that? I don't know how good the heads are. Big Belly, the Holly HP is my favorite in that it's the one that's at Westech and it's the one that I know. I didn't choose it over others because I've done extensive testing on all the others and know how they all work and know their limitations and stuff. This is there, and I need to be fast and efficient at tuning so I can do lots of testing. And so it just made it so that I could learn it. And luckily with Ish and Eric there to help show me what's going on, I'm pretty proficient at making all the wide open throttle stuff. Do you drive a cam truck? Yes, I have. The cam in my truck is an LM7. It's an LM7 stock monster, but it does have a muffler on it. So the cam is the valve events on the cam are right for the kind of muffler that I have on it. It's muffler cammed. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our poll at 90% saying yes. So I think it's accurate. 10% are saying, Richard, you don't know what you're talking about. What does anybody know what boost controller Ryan can use that does boost by gear? The Holly might do that in the management system, but I don't know what standalone control, if that's what you're talking about. I would like to have what I'd like to have on my truck is a transmission that will handle it, and then even a 5.3 with a cam and a blower on it would be good. That'd be fun. So I could, just to take my sons out and have fun. For donuts, ice cream. Do you notice a big difference in power between 600 and 750 CFM carbs? And it would depend on the application. Michael, have you considered building a high horsepower, low RPM LS base build? I don't know what you mean. So you're talking about, if it's below 5,000 RPM, you're talking about a torque build then, because at below 5,000 RPM, you're going to be making more torque than you're making horsepower because the crossover's after that. So you're talking about a torque build. I've done 6 liters like that. But if you're going to do that, the best way to make low speed power like that is displacement, long runner, compression, boost. Can't drive a dyno. No, but everything that you do on the dyno equates to what it's going to do when you go drive it. Looking for idle chop. A thumper cam probably would do that. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to do the K24 stuff. I like it. It was kind of cool. Yeah, 650 on a stock one. We did that on Ish's motor in a Civic. But ring gap will definitely help. Yeah, thinking, man. That's why I don't have a cam in there right now. It's my daily driver truck, and it has to get me to places. Who needs a blower when you can run a gear drive? You should make all the good noises, right? Hot mess. You're probably not going to be happy when you go to a fabricated aluminum one compared to the factory one. The factory one's probably going to be better. Mobile, I'm looking for more torque from prior message. You did say compression would overbore pistons and closed chamber LS1 heads. Yeah, there's not really such a thing as a closed chamber and open chamber head, although maybe a guy could argue that the 317 head would kind of be an open chamber head. But the things that make torque are displacement, more compression. These things also affect detonation too. Very mild cam timing, but that doesn't affect the torque at 2,000 RPM very much. Long runner intakes and boost all help. Better off with an LS3 or LS6 intake. But those aren't the same motor, though. You can't run those on the same combination. You can, like I said, with the silly adapters, but you shouldn't do that because that doesn't work. I've tested that. Hot mess. I can guarantee you that the long runner intake, like we call it the RAM intake. And what is it? There's the truck intake manifold, the SRT4, and then the other rounded beer keg composite one. That's the best one. That one makes the best average power. The SRT4 makes a little bit more peak power. The truck manifold is right in there too. But when you put any of these short runner ones, you're going to lose a bunch of power down low. Did you ever run the Speedmaster 351 Cleveland heads? We did. I think that's what we had on the. That might have been what we ended up running on the 400. I've tried running the Cathedral and Recport stuff and mixing and matching the intakes on the different heads with the adapters that the ICT billet guys or whatever sell. And they made those for the guys running the blowers, the LSA blowers on stuff, but it doesn't work very well on an NA combination. It loses power. I was really hoping that the LS3 intake manifold on a Cathedral port headed deal would be a good combination with the adapters, but it didn't. It just made less power. These the cam stuff doesn't bother me at all. The transmission is the problem. The 4L60E is definitely breakage prone. When should you change your lifter trays? Lifter trays are cheap. So if you're in the motor doing stuff, probably if your heads are off, I would definitely change them because they're cheap. And if the thing has high mileage, we know when they're bad on the junkyard motors when we are going to do a cam change, and we after we take the timing gear off, we spin the cam around, and if you hear that clunk 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 after you spin it, because you push the lifters up and then they come back down. If they come back down, the trays are not holding the lifters up, so the trays are worn out. So once they get worn out and won't hold the lifter up in place, they don't do that while it's running, obviously, because it's got something pushing on it again. But it gives you a good idea about how wallered out they are. And then the next stage is that they'll allow it to rotate. The Magnum intake manifold, I think, is the one that I was thinking of. That's what we call it. Do you ever test injector spray patterns? I've looked at them on the injector on the SNU flow machine, but haven't checked that in terms of power. I'd be surprised if it did anything. But we have the only place I've tried that is we tried doing some of that for fuel mileage and not for power, really. Richard, does a Magnum intake fit on the Hemi? It did, but we cut a big chunk of the front cover off, and then eventually we went and changed the front cover and went away from the truck stuff. On the engine dyno, we don't run all that stuff, so we eventually just put a car front cover on it because it made it easier. Ryan, so you got a 69 Mach 1. Congratulations. That's a really good looking car. 351 for your daily. Should I build it or just buy a Ford Racing? You can do that. A Ford Racing 427 crate motor is probably going to be an expensive deal. And what I would suggest, there's another option to keep the motor that's in the car if it's driving around and working, and just go get a 351 from the wrecking yard and build that up. It would be cheaper than the other option. AJ, it's Killer B16. There's a 1 and a 6 at AOL after what you wrote there, except there's only one E in B. Jasper sells a 500 horsepower rated 4L60E with a 3-year, 100,000 mile warranty. That's nice, and they'll replace the transmission. But if I was in the middle of between here and Ohio, like when the other transmission went out, that's still not going to be a cool deal. Yeah, yeah, Terry. That's the way that we check it if it falls, because we we want them not to fall, because I want junkyard motors to come and just be like brand new motors and work, and lots of them don't. So we have those sliding sticks that we use. I know guys use dowels and that works too, but we have those tools that actually go in, but they don't go in. The tools that they made actually don't work with all the different variations of lifters. I think that they designed them with the factory lifter and the slot in the factory lifter, but the way that they do the oiling and the slots are different on the different lifters, so it doesn't go in all of them. And the odd thing is it seems to go in one side and not the other sometimes. And I've even ground them down, and because you got to make it work. Any word on the GLH? I haven't been back there yet. I do want to go back and take it to the chassis now. Hot Mess, where are you at? My plan, my next trip, well, I'm going to go to West Tech, but the next big trip, I'm going to go out to Ohio and then to Florida. Philip, what didn't you try? I'm going to scroll back and see what you were talking about. Oh, I know some injectors have a divided pattern for a 4-valve head. I've seen those and what would happen in a regular port. What you don't want to happen is if the spray pattern is out so far that you hit the wall before it goes into the port and hits the wall, and then you just have fuel running in. It might not cause a big problem, but I'd rather not have that. Does Ellis lifter orientation matter? No, somebody asked me this the other day, actually, that was putting a motor together. As a matter of fact, I think it was Troy from West Tech. He said, well, does lifter orientation matter? I said, I certainly hope not, because I've never paid attention to it. And I remember talking to Brian about it. He goes, no, he goes, we a lot of times only because we're so, obsessive compulsive, I think is a good word. He said we'll orient the hole in the back, the feed or whatever in the back toward the back, because that's where the oil is coming from. He said, but it doesn't matter, because he said the different lifters are different anyway. So I said, honestly, I didn't think looking at the oiling that it made any difference, and it doesn't. We just put them all in, stick all the lifters in and go. I heard a rumor that the Trophy 4 is ready for testing. Can you see a variation of a Skyram on the Trophy 4? Yeah. Dave just sent me a photo of the thing is all painted. It looks fantastic. It looks great. I'm about halfway between Dayton and Cincinnati. Okay. So I will be coming up, but I'm probably going to fly out to Ohio, and then and they're in the Alliance area, I think. So I'm going to go there and hopefully do a chassis dyno test, so that then they can take and get the car painted and stuff. And I can bring it back and start doing chassis dyno testing with it and stories, videos. And then I'm going to fly from, the plan is, fingers crossed, fly from there down to Georgia. And then my buddy Jimmy and I are going to drive into swamps in Florida and wrestle alligators. Terry, you want to see a variation of the Skyram on the Trophy 4-cylinder? I need to make a Super Richie custom intake manifold to be able to do that. Fast 92 or 102 on an absolutely aspirated. Well, it depends on which manifold that you got. If you're buying either one, I'd always get the 102. It makes more power, and I would get a 102 throttle body, because there's no downside to that. And on that note, it is time to go. I've been here too long already. Thank you guys all for showing up. Please go see the 2 videos that I put up today. One Ford, one LS guest video. Interesting stuff. But I will be back tomorrow with more videos, and I will be back tomorrow on a live feed. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll see you tomorrow.